Hi everybody, my name is Bill Keithler and I'm a candidate for school board here in Hopewell Township. I've made a couple of videos over the past few weeks and shared them with the communities, and I've been having some wonderful conversations with neighbors. And I wanted to make one more video just to kind of wrap all those conversations up. Before I do that though, in one of my videos, I had a chart that looked like this, and this is $105 million of expenses for the district. And I emphasized with a lot of conviction that we're spending $89 million on people for salaries and benefits and $16 million on everything else. And I think I may have overstated that. I'm actually not certain what the number is. I've been pulling information out of the user-friendly budget in a way that it wasn't explicitly outlined, and I think I made an assumption that was incorrect. So I wanted to correct that. The number is going to be somewhat less than 89 million. It's going to be north of 70 million. It's going to be somewhere in that pretty wide range. But the ultimate point that I was making with the chart that I showed was that we can't pull $60 million for all of the improvements necessary in question one out of a $105 million budget. It'll be impossible to fund the improvements we need, just by cutting expenses out of the budget. So the takeaway is still the same, but I always tell my kids, when you make a mistake, say sorry. I wanted to acknowledge that I made some assumptions in my numbers that I think were incorrect. When I figure out how to get the right numbers, I promise I'll share it with everybody. But I did want to get that on the record. That 89 million is not the number. Okay, so lots of great conversations, lots of conversations that are still going to be ongoing in the weeks and months to come. But I wanted to tell you, if I don't get elected, Amanda and Hope are going to do a great job. If I do get elected, these are the goals that I have, for myself and for the board. So maintain high standards. I'm a father of two young boys. Obviously, I care about this a lot. And I know everybody in Hopewell does. We're a community that takes pride in our school system, and so that's obviously number one. Two, and this is another thing that we take pride in and we are awesome at, and that is providing support to students with special needs. And I think that speaks to our values as a community, even more broadly than simply our values in the school district. So that's important. And then third, and I've talked about this a lot, keeping the township in both boroughs. I would be representing the township, but I think we have to be thinking about the community as a whole, all three, the two boroughs and the township, keeping it affordable. And that can be difficult because 1 and 2 cost money. And particularly in an inflationary environment, how are we going to do that? And that's the approach. So my approach would be expense discipline. I've talked about this a lot. Polite but persistent. That's kind of my motto in questioning expenses. I don't think, when I look at teacher salaries, when I look at the ratio of teachers to administration, when I look at, the age of our buildings and the cost of maintaining them, I don't see anything that's really out of whack, right? And I've looked at, per pupil comparisons across different districts. Some amount of that is probably special education costs that, a portion of that we're getting reimbursed for anyway, and that might not show up in the numbers. So I'm saying at a high level, I don't think we can cut our way to affordability. I'm going to try. I'm not going to try to cut, in ways that are irresponsible, but certainly expense discipline in sort of preventing runaway spending growth. I'm going to be all over that. But I don't know that that's the way to affordability, but I'm going to keep my eye on it. The second item is funding the capital reserves. It's hard to do this, right? Everything costs money, and the state actually imposes a 2% cap on the growth in our spending. So putting money aside to fund capital reserves, and capital reserves again go towards the major infrastructure projects. So things that we're borrowing money for now in question one, and in question two. The alternative to borrowing and paying principal and interest sort of at the time of the project and afterwards is putting money aside in advance in what I call a rainy day fund, but in the district lingo is a capital reserve. I think there's a nice fiscal discipline, that gets imposed when you sort of pre-pay and pre-fund expenses, but that does put an additional tax load on our current taxpayers, and that kind of again works against affordability, for seniors in particular. Just something that we gotta try to do our best on, and sort of manage the affordability angle. I think ultimately the way that we manage the affordability angle, again, is not cutting, but is through new revenues. And I am not going to pretend to have all the answers here. I'm just saying this is something that I'm going to look at. And if you're going to hold me accountable for anything, I don't want it to be, Bill, how many dollars did you save out of the run rate? How many, what was the headcount reduction? I don't want to be known for somebody that shrank expenses. I would love to hit some home runs in terms of finding new revenue. And ultimately, that's how we take, the inflation that is flowing into our budget, into our expense base, whether it's, the things we purchase, the goods we purchase, the services we purchase, the teachers we pay. Inflation comes into the budget, and the only way that we can really prevent it from being passed on to taxpayers is finding new sources of revenue. Again, I'm coming into this humble. I told somebody the other day, the list of things that I don't know is a lot longer than the list of things I do know. But if elected, I'm going to lean in on it and try to make the most of it, and maybe most of all enjoy the conversations that I'm starting to have with many of you. I hope that they continue, and please vote. It's nighttime now. Tomorrow's election day. If you haven't decided how you're voting on the bond referendum questions, please consider voting yes on both. I've made some videos to talk about, why, how I'm thinking about the issues, and then in particular why I think it's imperative that we vote at minimum yes on question 1. Again, I voted yes on both, and I hope that you'll join me. So good night and best wishes, everybody. Take care.